Everyone talks about social movements these days. It's the catchy word, okay? In all the cities in the world, in all the countries in the world, we talk about social movements, social movements, social movements. And we need to understand that there is a discussion about the social movements, what they can do, what they cannot do, and the way forward, and what is the impact of this on education. Now, the first thing I want to say is that social movements, they're not new, all right? Even if we use the word social movements nowadays, they didn't exist, it was not created yesterday. There were social movements for a long, long time, all right? And liberation movements and social democratic parties, left parties, and trade unions, they existed a long, long time, and they were social movements. Okay, so when we talk about social movements today, we need to understand it didn't start yesterday, and we have our ancestors. The liberation movements, they were social movements. They were not just leaders, they involved masses and masses of people in Palestine, in Egypt, in Brazil, in Canada, etc., etc. So our social movements, they come from the liberation movement. And it's important to understand and reflect on this, because it gives us a sense of continuity and accumulation, and not to think about the social movements today as some sort of magical, absolute solution. They are not. They come from the past. They are inventing something new today, and it will continue after the social movements that we know today. There will be other social movements and other political expressions and social expressions. Second point, what are these social movements that we talked about today? We talked about many, many things, all right? Maybe that's one of the most important issue, is that now social movements are not defined in a little box. What is new? There's continuity, there's history. It's important to understand. But there is something new also, all right, with the social movements. One of the most important characteristic or dimension of the new social movements, they are everywhere. And everyone can define himself or herself as social movements. Local, very local level, all right, fighting on education, on environment. Big national movements fighting for trade union rights or peasants' rights. And so many, many, many expressions are coming now under the label social movements. Why? Why? There are three reasons, to make it very simple. The first reason, or the first concept, is autonomy. Social movements now are defined as autonomous. They are in relation. They work with the political parties, with the liberation movements, with the social democracy, they work with themselves, but they are autonomous. Okay, it's me. Excuse me, it's me. I like the big movements, I like the big leaders, I like Marwan, I like Mustafa, I like all of them, but it's me. I am a person, and I work in a movement, and I am this movement with others. And my right to speak is as important as the big movements, the big leaders, the big liberation movements, etc., etc. It's not hostile. Okay, you can work with the others, but I have my autonomy. So this is new, I think, in the thinking of the social movements. The second, pluralism. We are together, we march together like yesterday, but we are distinct, and this is not a problem. We have many flags, not just one flag. This is not a problem, because we recognize that pluralism, it's an asset, it's a quality, it's an advantage, rather than something that puts us down. This is new in the new thinking of the social movements, that pluralism, it's something that makes us stronger, not weaker. And third, the social movements are broadly speaking against capitalism in the way it exists now, which we usually say neoliberalism. We're against. We are against imperialism. We are against colonialism. We are against other things. But we are mostly against neoliberalism and imperialism. Are we just against? No, we're not just against. We are for a new set of ideas and proposals and concepts in the way that we think we can rebuild the world. It's ambitious. We are ambitious. We're not small. We don't think very, very small. We think very, very big. And we think we have very good ideas on education, on environment, on the economy, etc., etc. And the dominants, the rulers, they don't have ideas at this point. They are paralyzed in their mind in Washington, in London, in Paris, in Tel Aviv, etc., etc. But we have very good ideas. So we're not just against the colonial domination of Palestine. You are much more than that. You have a view. You are developing this view about the kind of Palestine that you want to rebuild. So autonomy, pluralism, and building alternatives. So the World Social Forum, by the way, it's a very modest project, but very ambitious project. It's only one thing. It's the place to discuss. All of us together in freedom and liberty and capacity to express all sorts of ideas. I don't agree with you. So what? Am I going to die if I don't agree with you? No, you are not going to die. I'm not going to die. And the World Social Forum, for those who had not the chance to experiment it, it's like that. Free thinking, all right? Completely free thinking. So to conclude, what about education? Well, it's about education. All of this that I spoke, it's about education. It's about building our understanding, building our knowledge, and building our skills. Empowering, okay, the capacities of citizens to act, to think for themselves. They like Mustafa, they like Marwan, they like all of that, but they think for themselves. And education is to give them the tools, the power to think for themselves. Yesterday I said, liberation for education. Without liberation, without a political context, without a state, here in Palestine it's pretty obvious, and in many countries it's also very obvious. You need liberation so that you have comprehensive education. So in other words, you fight for liberation. But you need education to have liberation. Because if you don't have education, if you don't have empowered individuals and communities, you will not have liberation. You will have something else. You will have a Bantustan, you will have, I don't know what you will have, but you will not have liberation. In this process, the educators, many of us here in this room, we are teachers, we are educators. The educators is to be educated. And the educated, the students, the young people, the poor people, and everyone else, they are educators. The educator is educated, and the educated is educator. And why is that? Because science, knowledge, competence, skills, they're not produced only in the university, only by the educators. They're produced everywhere. They're produced in the forest of Amazonia, and they're produced in the peasant communities of Palestine, Egypt, and everywhere else. So for this, it's complicated. It's complicated for us, the professors, the teachers, the educators, because we have to listen. Listening is difficult. Speaking sometimes is more easy. Listening is difficult. Why? Because it's not just hello, how are you? I understand you in Arabic, French, or English. It means understanding what you really mean. It's understanding your language not just as linguistic signals, but understanding your language by your concepts and your methodologies. So you know that. You go in, especially in peasant communities, in rural communities, they have fantastic knowledge about the land, about agriculture, about all sorts of things. And we don't listen. Most of the time we don't listen. Now we have to listen. And the World Social Forum help us to get access to these new knowledge, to these new methodologies, to these new words. In finishing, you know that there's many new words now that we use, we don't even think. Do you know, Palestinian, I'm talking to the Palestinian, do you know now that intifada, it's not an Arabic word. Do you know that intifada is in the dictionary in French and in English? Because intifada has become the word of the oppressed. And it has become the word of liberation. Not just in Palestine and not just in Arabic. There are thousands, perhaps even millions of new words like this.